like to begin by thanking the organizers of this event for asking me to participate. I'm very honored. Thank you so much. I also want to take this occasion to say that, ironically perhaps, given my presence at this panel, my own expertise as a historian of the Ottoman Empire really straddles the Armenian genocide. I am in no way an expert on that. My own work has focused on Jews and Christians in earlier Ottoman times, specifically in the 17th, 18th, early 19th centuries, using the Ottoman court, which was actually the Muslim court, which was used by Christians, including Armenians and Jews. And then in more recent times, I have done work on the First World War, but again on the Syrian experience, the civilian experience, which involved actually the death of about 300,000 civilians. And I should add here that among many Lebanese historians, comparisons have been made between what has been called the Young Turks' purposeful extermination of Lebanese, whether as Lebanese or as Christians, to the Armenian genocide. So I guess all of this is to say that I am going to respond not as a specialist on the Armenian genocide, because I am not, but as a historian and, of course, as a historian of the Middle East and of the Ottoman Empire. I have to start off by saying that for many historians, whether they specialize in the Armenian genocide or not, the question is quite complicated. And so what I'd like to do is, rather than respond, honestly, because I did not have access to the text, so I could not really respond, although there is a lot of overlap in my response, just going to take a few minutes, less than 10 minutes, to outline certain questions, certain ideas that hopefully will provoke discussion. So what I'm going to argue is that for a number of reasons, the Armenian genocide presents complications, and I think you got a sense of the political complications already from the previous speaker. So let me run through these reasons. The Armenian genocide does not only belong to historians. In this respect, it is not unique. Events involving mass suffering and death, particularly genocide, belong to the public sphere. Survivors, eyewitnesses, journalists, novelists, artists, photographers, and of course the film industry. I did take a look at the photographs outside, and as a historian, again, not really as a historian who's worked with photographic documentation, however, I would like to add that photographs, of course, do document a historical presence, particularly in the face of deniers. And also, of course, they do document historical rights to territory and stand as testimony for genocide. They also tell stories and weave historical narratives and attempt to keep the past alive, which is, I suspect, one of the many reasons we are here today, so as not to forget. They also, of course, the photographs memorialize lost peoples, lost places, and when they do involve pictures of individuals, as in fact one of the photographs outside does, they also individualize and humanize the suffering, give us faces and sometimes names that we can attach to the tragedy. The Armenian genocide, and this is the second reason that I think it is complicated, is that it has, of course, targeted an ethnic community and obliterated 1.5 million people. It is not surprising, therefore, that the genocide has come to represent a foundational experience in Armenian history. It has further cemented bonds of community that go thousands of years and has become part of Armenian national identity. Number 3, among nationalists in Turkey, references to the genocide are considered insults to Turkishness and are often criminalized. Access to archival material is still restricted. Until recently, there was little public awareness, let alone education, in Turkey about the genocide. Much of this should ring a familiar bell, I think, among the American public in the earlier decades of the 20th century, as well as among an older generation of American historians. Narratives involving Native Americans and slavery were hardly acknowledged. Only relatively recently have these unsavory aspects of the past been incorporated into the broader narrative of the American historical experience. The same may be said of post-war efforts in Germany, France, and the Vatican to acknowledge the Nazi part. In Japan, wartime crimes committed in China and in Korea are still, of course, the object of burning contestation. In some ways, too, nationalist narratives in Turkey are the mirror image of Armenian nationalist narratives. They are about victimization of self and demonization of the other. I think for many of us, it always comes as a great shock to hear Turkish nationalists actually turn the table on the Armenian genocide and actually insist that they, rather than Armenians, were the victims of Armenian violence. Interestingly, the founding father of the Turkish Republic, Mustafa Kemal, a young Turk who has had no hand himself in the genocide, did call it a shameful act, and I'm quoting here. This description may help us understand why memory of the genocide was slowly erased in Republican Turkey in the earlier parts of the 20th century. It did not sit comfortably with Turkey's self-image as a civilized European and forward-looking nation. One has to stop to appreciate the irony given the European colonial record on mass killings. For Turkey, as you've already heard, of course, this is not only about nationalist self-image, but about territorial claims and restitution, which, needless to say, the state finds quite threatening. The genocide is also politically charged, and I think our speaker today has more than made that very, very clear. But let me just add a few things. In 2006, France, for example, passed a law criminalizing the denial of the genocide. It remains one of the issues confronting Turkey in its application for membership in the EU. And I have to say that my impression, as you described, was that the United States has not quite formally recognized the killings as a genocide, as neither has, of course, Turkey and the State of Israel. Even though, this is my fifth point, even though there is a growing and new field and very vibrant field on genocide studies, which includes the Armenian genocide, there are also other complications coming from historians, and especially a few historians of the Holocaust who have been quite vocal in insisting that the word genocide should only apply to what happened under the Nazis. And this will bring me to my last point. Many historians find themselves in deep and dangerous waters when they attempt to provide a historical understanding of the genocide. They are often interpreted, their interpretations as rationalization and justification of the genocide. Those of us who, for example, resist locating the causes of the genocide in fanatic Islam or in the violent nature of the Turk or in the very structure of Ottoman rule throughout its centuries are sometimes labeled apologists, even deniers. There are, of course, politicians and historians who fit the bill, absolutely. But among others, the discussion of the genocide has remained fraught, particularly when the question is about causes, the causes that led the Young Turks to initiate the deportations and the genocide of 1915. So let me conclude here, and I will try to strike an optimistic note. In the year 2000, a workshop called Workshop for Armenian Turkish Studies was established, bringing together Armenian and Turkish historians of the genocide. In the year 2005, a conference on Armenian history at Becce University in Istanbul, which is one of the most important universities, actually took place after an initial cancellation. In 2014, I attended a conference on the First World War at Shahir University in Istanbul, where in fact there was a whole panel on the Armenian genocide, and it was freely discussed. I have to admit that when I was invited to that conference, I was worried that it might be sponsored by parties who would be deniers, but when I saw the names of the participants, and especially including Armenian historians, I did go and was very pleasantly surprised to see that there was, in fact, a space, a safe space to discuss and openly talk about the genocide. A Turkish historian by the name of Taner Akşam has published 3 books, including a more recent book documenting evidence for the Armenian genocide. Orhan Pamuk, a Turkish novelist who won the Nobel Prize, has also spoken out against it. And finally, there is the story of Hrant Dink, a famous Armenian journalist in Turkey who actually was gunned down by a nationalist Turk recently. And while on the one hand, it was deplorable to see thousands of Turks cheering his action as a kind of as a national hero, describing him as such, there were also tens of thousands of young Turkish people who walked the streets carrying signs, "We are all Hrant, we are all Armenian."